Hello students, this video gives you the explanation of the second part of the lesson, digestion and absorption. Here we are going to learn the process of digestion and the role of digestive enzymes. Absorption and assimilation of proteins, carbohydrates and fats, the process of digestion, caloric value of carbohydrates, proteins and fat, nutritional and digestive disorders. What is digestion? The process of converting the solid food into smaller units which could be absorbed by our intestine is called digestion. The solid food is converted into absorbable, assimilable units, and this is accomplished by mechanical as well as chemical processes. Mechanical processes include the digestion, the grinding and the chewing of the food, which is called as mastication in our buccal cavity, and this is assisted by the tooth and the tongue. The mere smell, sight and the taste of the food will help us to secrete the saliva, which is a reflex action. The saliva contains water, electrolyte, salivary amylase called ptyalin, antibacterial agents lysozyme and the lubricating agent mucus. Saliva contains water, electrolyte like sodium, Na+, potassium K+, Cl-, bicarbonate HCO3-, salivary amylase, which is an enzyme called ptyalin, antibacterial agents lysozymes. This lysozyme will help to kill the bacteria that is present in our mouth along with the food, and the lubricating agent called mucus, which is a glycoprotein. This mucus will mix with the food particles and will moisten, soften and lubricate the food and help to adhere the food particles that are masticated in our mouth, and this convert the mucus, saliva convert the food into a bolus. In the mouth itself, about 30% of the carbohydrate, which is a polysaccharide, starch, they are hydrolyzed, they are broken down into disaccharides called maltose. This bolus is then passed down into the esophagus through the pharynx. This process is called swallowing or deglutition. The bolus will further pass down the esophagus and reaches the stomach with the help of the successive waves of muscular contraction called peristalsis. The gastroesophageal sphincter muscle will control the opening and the closure of the mouth of the stomach and helps in the passage of food into the stomach. Food remains in the stomach for about 4 to 5 hours. Here also the rhythmic peristaltic movement will help in churning and mixing the food with the gastric juice and helps to make it into a creamy liquid called chyme. Stomach wall also secrete the gastric secretion, gastric juice, and this secretion is controlled by the autonomic reflexes. So the secretion of the gastric juice will begin when the food is in the mouth itself. This gastric juice contains HCl and proenzymes pepsinogen. HCl makes the medium acidic. This pepsinogen is the proenzyme or the precursor of pepsin. This, on the exposure to this HCl, will get converted into the active form of the enzyme called pepsin, and this pepsin will convert the proteins into proteoses and peptones. The HCl that provides the acidic medium becomes optimum for the activation of the pepsin, and it also kills the bacteria which are harmful, and this will avoid the putrefaction or the decay of the food in the stomach itself. The mucus and the bicarbonates that are present in the gastric juice will help to protect the mucosal epithelium of the stomach wall from the eroding nature of the highly acidic HCl. Another proteolytic enzyme that is found in the gastric juice, especially in the infants, is renin. Renin helps in the digestion of milk. The milk protein chesinogen is converted into chesin by renin in the presence of calcium ions. And this enzyme secretion will gradually decrease when the children grow. Now the digestion in the small intestine. Small intestine gets the digestive enzymes like bile, pancreatic juice and the intestinal juice. The movements of the muscular layer of the small intestine will help in the thorough mixing of the food with the various secretion of the intestine, and thereby it facilitates the digestion. The bile contains the bile pigments like bilirubin and biliverdin. Bilirubin and biliverdin are the breakdown products of hemoglobin. When the dead RBCs, when they are broken down in the liver, they produce bilirubin and biliverdin. Bile also contains bile salts, cholesterol, phospholipids, but bile has no enzymes. Bile will help in the emulsification of fat. What is emulsification of fat? The surface tension of the fat droplets that holds the fat as the bigger globules will be reduced by the bile salts. So when these bigger fat droplets mix with the bile salts, it will break up these fat droplets into smaller globules. And bile also helps in the activation of the lipases. The lipase enzyme helps in the digestion of the lipids, proteins and partially digested protein in the chyme. So when this chyme reaches the intestine, the proteolytic enzymes of the pancreatic juice act upon it, and it will help in the breaking up of this protein. Now the pancreatic juice contains enzymes like trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, carboxypeptidases, pancreatic amylases, pancreatic lipases and nucleases. Trypsinogen is the precursor of trypsin, which is activated by the enzyme called enterokinase, and enterokinase is secreted by the intestinal mucosa. This intestinal mucosa secretes the enterokinase that will activate the trypsinogen into trypsin, and trypsin will convert the inactive chymotrypsinogen into active chymotrypsin. So here we can see the pancreatic juice contains the first component called trypsinogen, and this trypsinogen is the precursor of trypsin. This gets activated and converted into active trypsin by enterokinase, which is secreted by the intestinal mucosa. This active trypsin in turn will activate the chymotrypsinogen into chymotrypsin. Trypsin will hydrolyze and break down the proteins into polypeptides and peptones. And chymotrypsin will associate with some of the amino acids and helps in the hydrolysis and breaking up of the longer amino acid chain into smaller wines by breaking the peptide bonds of them. Pancreatic juice contains the pancreatic amylase. This will convert the glycogen and starch into maltose. And lipase will help in converting the emulsified fat by the bile juice, that is triglycerides, and hydrolyzes into free fatty acid and monoglycerides. And monoglycerides are again turned into fatty acids and glycerol. Nucleases of the pancreatic juice will help in breaking up of the nucleic acid into nucleotides and nucleosides. So glycogen and starch are converted by the pancreatic amylase to maltose. Emulsified fat are converted into free fatty acids and monoglycerides by lipases, and this again hydrolyzed to form the fatty acid and glycerol. Nucleic acid are converted by the nucleases enzyme into nucleotides and nucleosides. I hope you all know what are nucleotides. They are the combination larger molecule of the components phosphate, pentose sugar and nitrogen bases. When this phosphate is removed, it becomes the nucleoside. The secretion of the Brunner's gland along with the secretion of the intestinal gland is called as succus entericus. The succus entericus contains the enzymes like maltase, lactase, sucrase, peptidases, lipases, nucleotidases, nucleosidases. And these enzymes break down the product of bile and the pancreatic digestion into further simpler ones. Like maltose is converted into glucose plus glucose by maltase. Sucrose is converted by sucrase into glucose and fructose. Lactose is converted into glucose and galactose. Dipeptides, tripeptides are converted into amino acids. Nucleotides are converted by the nucleotidases into nucleosides and phosphoric acid. And nucleosides are converted into sugar and nitrogenous bases. Diglycerides and the monoglycerides are converted by the lipases into fatty acids and glycerol. So all the complex molecules are converted into the simpler ones, which could be easily absorbed by the walls of the intestine. The mucus, along with the bicarbonate ions, will provide an alkaline medium that will activate, that is very much helpful for the enzymatic action in the intestine. As a result of this digestion, all the macromolecules are converted into their corresponding monomeric units. Carbohydrates are converted into monosaccharides like glucose, fructose and galactose. Proteins are converted into amino acids. Lipids are converted into fatty acids and glycerol. And they are absorbed by the small intestine in the region of jejunum and ileum. And the undigested and the unabsorbed substances will be taken to the large intestine. The activities of the gastrointestinal tracts are controlled by neurons and hormones for the proper coordination, and they coordinate the different parts of the intestine. Secretions of the stomach and the intestine are stimulated by the neural signals, and the hormones control the secretion of the digestive juices. These local hormones are produced in the gastric and the intestinal mucosa. Now absorption. What is absorption? Absorption is a process by which the end product of the digestion will get into the blood and the lymph through the intestinal mucosa. The villi, they are the structures which are present in the lumen of the ileum. They are the absorbing unit, and it consists of lacteal ducts, which is in the middle, and this is surrounded by the network of blood capillaries. The process of absorption involves both active and passive absorption and facilitated transport. Small amount of glucose, amino acid and electrolytes like chloride ions are absorbed by simple diffusion into the villi, and this will get into the bloodstream depending upon the concentration gradient. What is concentration gradient? Normally the smaller units, smaller molecules, simpler molecules are absorbed, will be transported, will move from the region of the higher concentration to the region of the lower concentration. So inside in the lumen of the intestine it is higher, and in the blood when it is lower, it is automatically absorbed by the simple diffusion. But the substances like fructose, they are absorbed with the help of a carrier ions like sodium Na+. Since the carrier ions are helping in the absorption of the fructose, it is called as facilitated transport. Nutrients like amino acid, glucose, electrolyte like sodium are absorbed into the blood even against a concentration gradient by active transport. And the insoluble substances, the fatty acids, glycerols, some of the fat soluble vitamins, they will combine with a small spherical water soluble droplets. They will combine to form small spherical water soluble droplets, which are called as micelles, and these micelles are absorbed into the intestinal mucosa. From the intestinal mucosa, they are resynthesized into protein coated fat globules. This protein coated fat globules inside the intestinal mucosa are called as chylomicrons. From there it can be easily transported into the lacteals, which in turn will lead into the lymphatic duct. The lymphatic duct will release the absorbed substances into the bloodstream. So the insoluble fatty acids and glycerols and fat soluble vitamins will incorporate to form the smaller spherical water soluble droplets called micelles, and it is absorbed by the intestinal mucosa. So inside the intestinal mucosa they are resynthesized, they are converted into protein coated fat globules. They are called as chylomicrons, and chylomicrons are transported into the lacteals, and lacteals will transport them into the bloodstream. Lacteals will transport them into the lymphatic duct. From the lymphatic duct it is absorbed into the bloodstream. The fatty acids are absorbed by the lymph duct, whereas the other substances, other materials are actively or passively taken up by the capillaries of the villi. The water soluble vitamins are also absorbed by simple diffusion or active transport into the bloodstream. The transport of water will depend on the osmotic gradient. Actually, absorption takes place in all the parts of our gastrointestinal tract. It starts from the mouth. So in the mouth itself, some of the substances like sugar, alcohol and medicines are absorbed. That's why some of the medicines are even kept under the tongue. They are directly absorbed by the capillaries which are seen in the lower side of our tongue and the mucosa of our mouth. So some of the drugs are kept under the tongue for emergency purpose and immediate result. And the food is also absorbed by the stomach wall, small intestine and large intestine. Maximum absorption takes place in the small intestine. Absorption of the simple sugars, alcohol takes place in the stomach also. Large intestine is also involved in the absorption of small amount of water, vitamins and some of the minerals and certain drugs. Now this is a summary of the process of digestion and absorption. So food is taken into the mouth. In the mouth, the carbohydrate by the amylase, it is converted into monosaccharides and disaccharides. And in the lumen of the small intestine, the pancreatic amylase will help in the conversion of the monosaccharides and disaccharides to form monosaccharides, and that will be absorbed into the bloodstream. Whereas in case of lipids, so repeat digestion takes place after mixing with the bile juice. The pancreatic lipases and intestinal lipases will convert the fatty acids and glycerides into monoglycerides and diglycerides. And this fatty acids and glycerols will be converted into micelles, and micelles, when it is absorbed into the intestinal mucosa, it is converted into protein coated chylomicron globules, and this is absorbed into the lymph vessels. Whereas in the case of proteins are converted in the stomach into proteoses and peptones by pepsin, and in the smaller intestine they are again broken into dipeptides, tripeptides and amino acids, and finally the amino acids are absorbed into the bloodstream. The absorbed substances are transported through the blood and the lymph. They are taken to the liver by the hepatic portal system. So here you can see the hepatic portal system. This will absorb the digested nutrients and take it to the liver, and from the liver it is transported to all the regions of our body, and the body tissue will be absorbing the substances for their activities and incorporate them into their protoplasm, and this is what is called as assimilation. So what is assimilation? All our body tissues will utilize the absorbed substances that are given by the liver for their activities, and they incorporate these molecules into the protoplasm by the process called assimilation. Egestion. What is egestion? Egestion is the removal of the digestive waste and unabsorbed substances. And from the ileum, the unabsorbed substances will enter into the large intestine, and there it contains mostly fiber, and this is called as roughage. The roughage is also utilized by the symbiotic bacteria that are present in our large intestine, and the symbiotic bacteria will produce the useful substances like vitamin K and some metabolites. What are these metabolites? They are the end product or the intermediates of the biochemical reaction that are utilized by our body. All these vitamins and the metabolites are absorbed in the colon along with the water, and the waste, which is solid, will be converted into fecal matter in the rectum. The fecal matter will initiate a neural reflex that will cause an urge or the desire for its removal, and the ejection of the fecal matter through the anal opening is called as defecation, and it is a voluntary process and it is carried out with the help of the peristaltic movement of the intestine. Now we shall learn about the caloric value of carbohydrate, proteins and fat. So we get energy from our food. 50% of our energy is derived from the carbohydrate of our diet, and 35% from fat, 15% from protein. And so the requirement of the protein, carbohydrate and fat, they vary in their amount. We require about 400 to 500 grams of carbohydrate every day. Similarly, 60 to 70 grams of fat and 65 to 75 grams of protein per day. So balanced diet of each individual will vary according to their age, gender, according to the level of their physical activities and other conditions like pregnancy and lactation. It will not be similar for all the individuals. So carbohydrates, they are the sugar and the starch, and they will provide energy for our body. The caloric value of carbohydrate is 4.1 kilocalories per gram. And the physiological fuel value, how much of energy we can produce out of it, is 4 kilocalories per gram. The fat has the caloric value of 9.45 kilocalories, and the physiological fuel value is 9 kilocalories per gram of fat. What is the physiological fuel value? It is the amount of energy our body gets when we eat 1 gram, whereas caloric value is the amount of energy that is available from 1 gram of food when it is digested. What is available and what we get is the difference. The amount of energy is available is caloric value, and the amount of energy our body gets out of it is the physiological fuel value. Proteins, the caloric value of the protein is 5.65 kilocalories, and the physiological fuel value of protein is 4 kilocalories. And proteins are required for the growth and repair of our body tissues. According to ICMR recommendation, the daily requirement of protein of an individual is about 1 gram per 1 kg of our body weight. That means if our body weight is 60 kg, we must consume 60 grams of protein every day. Now let us see the nutritional and digestive disorders. So we may get some infections of bacteria, virus and parasitic worms in our stomach that causes the disease or the disorders. The infection of the pathogens will cause inflammation. The inflammation in the colon region is called as colitis. Itis is the term that denotes inflammation, and this colitis is associated with the symptoms like rectal bleeding, abdominal cramp and diarrhea. Protein energy malnutrition. If the growing children do not consume required amount of protein, they develop some symptoms and the disorders in their body, and this protein deficiency diseases are termed as marasmus and kwashiorkor. In kwashiorkor, the child will be having dry skin, pot belly, edema, accumulation of water in the legs and the face, shunted growth, and the hair color will change, and they showed general weakness and irritability. In the case of marasmus, which is considered as the acute form of protein malnutrition, children suffer from diarrhea and the body becomes lean and weak. Indigestion. So indigestion is a disorder in which the food that we eat does not get digested properly, leading to the feeling of fullness and fullness of stomach. And this is caused due to inadequate enzyme secretion certain anxiety feeling, food poisoning, overeating and spicy food. Constipation, when the fecal matter retained within the rectum and when they are not eliminated out properly, then it causes constipation. And this happens due to lack of physical activities and poor intake of fiber in the diet. Vomiting is reverse peristalsis. Sometimes harmful substances or the contaminated food that we consume will be ejected through the mouth from the stomach, and this action is controlled by the vomit center, which is located in our medulla oblongata. So vomiting is preceded by the feeling of the nausea. Jaundice, in this condition the liver is affected. The defective liver will fail to break down the hemoglobin into bile pigments, because of which there will be deposition of these pigments that will change the color of the skin and the eye to yellow, and this is called jaundice. Jaundice is also caused due to hepatitis viral infection. Next disease is liver cirrhosis. Liver cirrhosis is a chronic disease. Chronic means it will happen slowly and gradually and causes irreversible damage to the liver. The degeneration and destruction of the liver cells take place, and that in turn results in the abnormal blood vessels and the bile duct, leading to the formation of the fibrosis. And it is also called as deserted liver or scarred liver. It is caused because of the infection, consumption of poison, malnutrition and alcoholism. Gallstones. When there is any alteration in the composition of the bile juice, it causes stones in the gallbladder. Stones are mostly formed of the crystallized cholesterol in the bile. Gallstone causes obstruction in the duct, cystic duct, hepatic duct, hepatopancreatic duct, and this causes pain, jaundice and pancreatitis, that is inflammation of the pancreas. Next we have appendicitis. Appendix is the vermiform structure that is present at the juncture of small intestine and large intestine. When there is an inflammation in this vermiform appendix, it causes severe abdominal pain. The treatment includes removal of this appendix by surgery. If it is not treated in time, it may cause a rupture, and that will result in the infection of the abdomen, which is called as peritonitis. Next is hiatus hernia or diaphragmatic hernia. We all know that diaphragm is a thin sheet of connective tissue that will divide the abdominal cavity from the thoracic cavity on top. The esophagus of the alimentary canal lies in the thoracic cavity, whereas the stomach lies in the abdominal cavity, and diaphragm only divides it. And so the esophagus passes through the diaphragm down into the abdominal cavity and continued as the stomach. When there is a structural abnormality in which the superior part of the stomach, here you can see the superior part of the stomach will protrude slightly above into the thoracic cavity through the diaphragm, and this causes hiatus hernia. The exact cause is unknown, but people are saying it may be caused because of the damage or weakened muscle tissue, or it may be caused by applying too much of pressure on the muscles around the stomach while coughing, vomiting, straining, etc. Or even when you lift the heavy object, this hiatus hernia can happen. Heartburn is also common in those people who are having hiatus hernia. So in this condition, the stomach content will travel to the esophagus and sometimes into the oral cavity also, and causes pain in the chest. And this is due to the eroding action of the HCl or acidity that is present in the stomach, that is traveling to the esophagus and the oral cavity. Next condition is called diarrhea. So diarrhea is a most common gastrointestinal disorder, and it is caused because of the infection of bacteria and virus. The bacteria and virus enter through our food and water. During this infection, when the colon is infected, the lining of the intestine will be damaged by this bacteria and virus. Because of that, the colon will be unable to absorb the digested food and the fluid. This causes abnormal frequency of the bowel movement, increased liquidity of the fecal discharge, and this is what is known as diarrhea. The abnormal frequency of bowel movement and increased liquidity of the fecal discharge is called diarrhea. So if it is not treated, it causes dehydration of the body, and the treatment is usually the oral hydration therapy. It involves drinking of plenty of fluids, sipping small amount of water at a time to rehydrate the body. Next complaint is peptic ulcer. This also refers to the eroded area of the tissue lining in the stomach or the duodenum. So duodenum ulcer is common in the people of the age group between 25 to 45 years, and gastric ulcer is more common in the persons above the age of 50 years. And ulcers are mostly due to the infection of the bacteria which is called as Helicobacter pylori, and this was first discovered by Robin Warren, Barry Marshall in the year 2005, and they were awarded Nobel Prize for it. So Helicobacter pylori causes peptic ulcer. But peptic ulcer can also be caused due to the uncontrolled usage of aspirin drug, certain anti-inflammatory drugs. It may also be caused due to smoking, consuming alcohol, caffeine, and due to psychological stress. Obesity. Obesity is the excess storage of fat in the body as adipose tissue. Obesity may be caused due to genetic factors, high intake of food, exocrine disorder, or metabolic disorder. Obesity may induce hypertension in the person, atherosclerotic heart diseases, and diabetics to the individual. The degree of obesity can be assessed as body mass index, in short BMI. So BMI should range for an adult between 19 to 25. If it is above 25, it is considered as obese. How to calculate BMI? We need two data, that is weight in kg of a person and height of the person in meter. By substituting in the formula, that is BMI is equal to weight in kg by height in meter square. If for example, if a person is having 50 kg weight and his height is 160 centimeters, so we can calculate BMI as 50 by the centimeter is converted into meter as 1.6 square, that is equal to 19.5. The person is normal. If this value is above 25, the person is considered as obese, and if it is below 19, the person is weak.